Hello everyone. So I wasn't actually gonna make this video, but I've had so many requests for another Pokemon video. And I had one lying around that I never got to make. Now the reason why I'm not really making any Pokemon videos anymore is because I really don't have that big of an interest in it anymore. It's really more of a treasure from the past at this point. So this video is really going to be an in-depth video dedicated to all my Poke subscribers, who has been waiting for a new Poke video for quite some time. This will be a final video for the time being, and I will perhaps get back to Pokemon once again. I'm not gonna lay out anything for sure, but maybe I'll get back to it in one way or another. We'll see about that. But yeah, Pokemon has always been, a game I loved to play when I was a kid. But it has always had this sort of a dark and sinister side to it. From mind control and physical torment all the way down to genocide and natural disasters, and much more child abuse than you'd think possible, Pokemon seems more and more to me like the darkest pits of Game of Thrones or something like the human centipede. Stick with me and we will run through some of the more horrifying aspects of Pokemon together. So I'm starting out the list with a sort of soft spot, one that is partly in your imagination but also in the Pokemon games itself. In the Pokemon games, there is something called breeding, which basically lets two Pokemon fuck in the daycare center, where they produce an egg which hatches into another Pokemon. Now on the very surface of things, Pokemon breeding is really just an effective way to breed specifically desired Pokemon into the world, usually with the intention of creating the strongest possible Pokemon in terms of stats, nature, and desired moveset, which normally isn't obtainable by leveling up alone. In short, it's most commonly used by serious Wi-Fi battlers. Reading further into Pokemon breeding can be a little complicated, but basically Pokemon don't need to be exactly the same type of species to breed. For example, Wailord, who holds the title of being the largest Pokemon alive to date, is able to breed with a dozen of other Pokemon that are a lot less than a foot tall. We don't actually monitor these actions behind the daycare center's bars, fortunately, but we can imagine how things unfolded, right? It only makes it worse when you consider that Wailord can learn the moves Bounce, Trash, and Water Spout. As kids, or even adults, I imagine most of us have fantasized about how awesome it would be to have supernatural powers. Running around producing Rasengans and Chidoris, flying off towards the horizon like any Dragon Ball character. This is all wishful thinking, but deep down we still wish we had these special powers in that sense, don't we? Or is that just me? Ash, as we all know, is the main character of the series, and he cannot produce any Rasengans or Chidoris, but he seems to be practically immortal since he stays the same age throughout the entire franchise, which will soon span over a couple of decades. There are moments when they straight out say that half a year passed, but they soon contradict themselves in later seasons. There are many theories as to how Ash gained this ability to passively prolong his life. A simple theory is that when Ash saw Ho-Oh for the first time in the first episode, he was granted eternal happiness, which encompassed staying a child his entire life. Another human being in Pokemon who possesses a different yet interesting ability is Sabrina from Kanto. She's basically able to use her psychic powers to bend objects and turn people into dolls, as shown in the anime. Those episodes with Sabrina, that particular ability is probably among some of the scariest things ever shown on kids' TV as far as I can recall. Brock doesn't exactly have any special powers other than being super creepy, and that goes for Old Brock and Pokemon Origins Brock. It would actually surprise me if there weren't more supernatural humans out there in the Pokemon world, but as I'm not watching the anime anymore or playing the games, I don't really know who that should be. But yeah, I think Ash and Sabrina are some pretty good examples. Lavender Town. Now this is a classic. The original Lavender Town theme is one of the primary reasons why Lavender Town itself is regarded as a, scary and creepy place to be. It scares people because the music is like the beating of a person's heart as they run in terror. The sound of an insect crawling across your skin, as well as the sound one hears in their soul when death has touched everyone around them and is now approaching them. Hearing music or melodies as an adult probably does not have the same impact and effect as it does in children. That is why so many people as children, including myself, turned off the music upon entering the town. Another one for Nightmare Fuel was a creepypasta written about the original theme for Lavender Town called Lavender Town Syndrome. It goes to say that people who listen to the Lavender Town theme for too long would start to get headaches and bleeding out of their ears. Now, obviously, that's just a creepypasta, but I thought it was pretty Nightmare Fuel inducing. But the music isn't the only thing about Lavender Town that has put so many people on guard. There is a Pokemon Tower, and in that Pokemon Tower a Pokemon Graveyard where dead Pokemon reside, which is located within Lavender Town, along with ghosts which are evidently real in this universe. This is one of the reasons why I would not want to live in Lavender Town if I had to pick which one of the towns I would like to live in. A couple of years ago, players discovered that if you enter a certain building in the Pokemon X and Y games in Lumia City, the screen will flash, the music will stop, and a creepy looking girl with a strange walking animation will float by. Fans had plenty of theories about this ghost girl, like the idea that she was looking for a specific trainer ID, or that she was tied to some other characters in the franchise. This does not mark the first time Pokemon games have featured a ghost girl of this kind. This ghost girl seems to be a thing they decided to add into the game, for some reason, but I assume there is no real connection Game Freak is trying to tie her into, because 2 years later and nothing has been added or explained about her. Something tells me they're just doing this to freak us out. Ghetsis child abuse. Ghetsis was a villain in the Black and White games, and he is a complete monster. First of all, he wants to take over the world through on-handed tactics, as most introduced Pokemon villains do these days. One of the ways he tries to approach this is by manipulating a so-called prophecy. He claims that destiny will choose a pure-hearted young boy to bond with a legendary Pokemon, and his one intention has for many years been to find and raise this perfectly fit candidate. He succeeds, bringing up a boy named N to be the most pure and innocent little child around. Also, notice how Game Freak was inspired by N, aka Nier, aka Nate River from Death Note. Ghetsis appears to be an inspirational speaker. As the game progresses, he gradually reveals his true identity. He has no qualms in using the innocence of N for his plot to rule the world. He has great charisma, as he was capable of convincing the members of Team Plasma, including the Sages, to follow his ways. His charisma is demonstrated as many people are somehow influenced by his speeches, making them to at least rethink the relationship between Pokemon and humans. Despite his villainous goals, this marks the first time the discussion of Pokemon rights and freedoms have been thoroughly discussed in-game. In the games, it's directly implied that he's not N's real father. What happened to the boy's actual parents is never addressed in the games, but one of the more popular theories is that Ghetsis had them assassinated, which, as we'll see later, is completely in character for him. Another one is that he is N's biological father, which begs the question of where the boy's mother is. Furthermore, since Ghetsis clearly cares nothing for anyone else, who's to say she even consented to bring the boy into the world in the first place? No matter how you try to approach this question of N's parentage, the answers are all deeply unpleasant, and given how much psychological damage he inflicts upon N over the time span of the series and its sequel, it doesn't get any better. In fact, it only gets worse and worse. Ghetsis' preferred way of parenting and method of raising N is for him to be the pure and perfect Pokemessiah, which encompassed cutting N off from any sort of human contact, because that might put dangerous ideas into N's head. So naturally, Ghetsis isolates N from the rest of the world and raises him alongside Pokemon. N likely spent the majority of his childhood inside his own room, all while being brainwashed by Ghetsis. It wouldn't be strange if he was also sexually abused. If the horrible monsters who shoots lightning, fire and eats people tear the boy to shreds, then meh, you can always get another one. And look at N's name, it's barely a step up from a number, indicating that he's barely more than a pawn in Ghetsis' scheme. It's not like he had to call himself N in order to hide his real name for fear of having it written in a death note. So it sort of begs the question of whether there were children littered from A to M, and what became of them before N came under Ghetsis' wings. Ghetsis wasn't truly loyal to Team Plasma's goal. Instead, he manipulated N to use Team Plasma for his own personal gain. He is known to be a brilliant scientist, as one of the Team Plasma scientists claims that he created a system capable of robbing Pokemon from the storage system from all over the world, as in robbing any Pokemon stored on the PC. In Pokemon Black and White 2, Ghetsis appears to have become somewhat insane, going so far as to command Kyurem to impale the player with icicles at one point. He's also visibly mentally unstable. But yeah, thank God we defeated that monstrosity of human trash for good. Legendary and giant Pokemon are literally living gods. An enormous creature approached the lighthouse, perhaps the largest Pokemon in the entire world. It would later be revealed to be a giant Dragonite, the only one of its kind. And this giant Dragonite is the very first giant Pokemon we've been introduced to in the anime. It was therefore kind of disappointing seeing its regular form fly around in the first movie. Back then he was this enormous creature that howled in the night, quite peaceful to begin with. Continuing the tradition, numerous of other giant Pokemon from different species appear throughout the anime and manga. A giant Haunter, a couple of giant Bug Pokemon, then there's others like Gulpin, Charizard, Mantin, Tentacruel, and so on. These giants are undoubtedly powerful and capable of destroying cities, as evident in the opening sequence, where Tentacruel spreads havoc. Whether or not they are stronger than legendaries is arguable, I suppose. I'd say that some of them are, depending on which legendary you are putting them up against. Dragonite was already a pseudo-legendary. As a giant Pokemon, he looked more than 20 times or maybe 30 times bigger compared to his regular size. If the difference in power between it and a regular Dragonite was proportionate to its size, then it would perhaps also be one of the most powerful Pokemon in existence. Back in the day, Pikachu won people over by being adorable and cute. Mewtwo achieved popularity among us all by being downright scary, depending on whether you follow the games or the anime series. Mewtwo either slaughtered its creators in a mad rampage because its psychic powers were too much for it to control. In the movies it murdered them because it hated the idea of being nothing more than a science project. Either way, it was the very first mass murder in what had until this point been a relatively cheerful children's tale. The games especially emphasized the darkness of the whole scenario by doing without the TV's big dramatic scenes and instead letting the player stumble upon the abandoned remains of the old building, in which Mewtwo had been born, razed to the ground in a destructive rampage with only a few journal entries lying around, giving any indication as to what kind of horror had occurred. Mewtwo was the second god to appear, but certainly not the last. As the series went on, Pokemon like Kyogre and Groudon were added to the franchise. These were less human but more animalistic, untamable forces of nature, bringing forth floods that threatened to drown the world or intensifying the sun's rays to the point that the entire world began burning to a crisp, depending on which game you were playing. Later games added Pokemon such as Yveltal, responsible for a massive holocaust that destroyed all life in its birthplace, and Dialga, an entity that controls time itself that has the power to erase entire worlds from the floor of history. And the worst part of it all? They don't have to be driven mad for them to pose a danger to humans. Some of them, like the Ice Dragon Kyurem, keeps towns in their thrall and abduct people to eat them. And as Mewtwo has shown us, some Pokemon takes it a step further and actively want to commit genocide against humanity. The Old Chateau, or Chateau, is famously known and referred to as being one of the scariest and most unsettling territories in Diamond, Pearl and Platinum. Arguably for some people in the entire gaming franchise. It's an abandoned mansion open to any passerbys who would like to stay overnight. Located at the end of Eterna Forest, what these innocent strangers will likely discover upon staying in this place is nothing less than supernatural. For starters, we see a couple of humans wandering around the place, or at least we're led to believe that they're humans. The first one to appear is a butler lookalike in the dining room, who upon seeing you literally floats away. Not only did he literally float away from the screen, when you go looking for him the way he went, he's gone, completely vanished, as if he was never there to begin with. A similar incident happens when you enter one of the rooms on the second floor. A little girl will appear next to you in another room. She walks away, but as you go looking for her, she's gone too. The Pokemon community. What is up with the Pokemon community? Well, some of you guys are the ones who come up with all these interesting, often wicked theories, fanfiction, and creepypastas. This is simultaneously something I really like about the Pokemon community, that they make the most unthinkable happen and the impossible absolutely possible. Nobody dwells deeper than anyone else into the game's big mysteries, critically evaluating poker evidence and coming up with logical conclusions, creating games like Lost Silver and many other eerie stuff. It is exciting, but your creations can also be quite scary and disturbing from time to time. I'm sure I'm not alone in saying that. Pokemon Red, Blue and Yellow, Errors and Glitches. For this place, I'll be explaining some of the glitches and errors that are in the old Pokemon games. Missing No is the gold standard in Pokemon glitches, and it's quite possibly one of the most well-known, easiest to unlock and celebrated glitches in the history of video games entirely. Missing No's familiar L-shaped appearance, non-threatening battle cry, memorable moveset, and item duplication properties are quite vanilla today. But how would you like to have been the first person to stumble across this beast? Can you imagine minding your own business when suddenly a random encounter begins? The screen freezes black for just a few seconds and then Missing No appears. Your butthole would have tensed up at this sight, and you don't deny that. So that is really the first glitch I wanted to show you, the Missing No glitch. Another glitch is the Old Man glitch. Remember that old man in Meridian City who wouldn't let you pass because he's a grumpy old fart who hasn't had his fill of coffee yet? That old man is programmed to do one thing and one thing only: throw a Pokeball. He still does this after the trainer sends out their glitch Pokemon, and as you might expect, the trainer blocks it. The old man never sends out any Pokemon, even though he appears to have one fainted Pokemon and 5 normal Pokemon. The battle ends immediately, and the old man acts like absolutely nothing out of the ordinary just transpired. It appears no lasting effects have taken place until you check your stats. Your name has changed to Old Man. Any Pokemon you have cannot be nicknamed because you are no longer their original trainer. They do not recognize you now. If you access your PC from a Pokemon Center, it's called Old Man's PC. If you check the sign outside of your house, it will read Old Man's House. You have become Old Man. He has stolen your identity and pulled off the greatest psychic cleansing ever documented. Everybody you have ever known starts calling you by the incorrect name like nothing happened. Even your very own mother doesn't even recognize you anymore. So that is the second glitch, which is pretty damn disturbing again. The third and final glitch is the Zatch glitch, and it is known as such because of a very specific string of data it injects directly into your save file. Unless you're tempted enough to fool with the game by using sequence breaks or GameShock, you won't come across this glitch. Glitches can be kind of like drugs, and after a while, free bashing Missing No just isn't enough to get you high. First things first, your opponent. Imposter Red has a full stock of Pokemon, though the first one appears to be poisoned. When he sends this Pokemon out, it's at level 153, and its health bar wraps around the entire screen. By this point, it's already too late. You are completely and utterly screwed. The game is now operating by itself and pulling code instructions from the 7th dimension, and the only thing you can do is get your ass kicked by the Pokemon of the Netherworld, while the mirror image of yourself laughs in a mocking tone. There is one escape though. Throw a Pokeball. No, seriously. Red will block it, the game will bust for a second, and the battle will suddenly end. But that is not the end of it, unfortunately. You may have escaped, but merely looking at the source of this Zax's infection is enough to let its mimetic properties propagate throughout your entire game. Earlier I mentioned the game injects a certain string of data into your game save. Check your trainer name. It's a bunch of sets. Any trainer you fight from now on, no matter who they are, will now be Zaz. And now you are too. These are just 3 of the many glitches found in the games, by the way. As a child reading through some of the old Pokédex entries of Red and Blue, it never really struck me how creepy and morbid and downright disturbing some of these were. Namely because I didn't think about it that way. Or think at all. I probably couldn't even read. But as an adult, looking through some of them, it seems legitimately insane to put them in a kid's game. I mean, look at them. Every other Pokemon is a child killer or kidnapper. Hypno will literally hypnotize and kidnap your children. Drifloon is no better because it will do the exact same thing in fly mode. Ghost Pokemon typically have disturbing entries, and Confagricus is a good example. It has been said that they swallow those who get too close and turn them into mummies. They like to eat gold nuggets. Now, this entry isn't really canon because it starts out with, "It has been said," so no facts here. However, Confagricus has more in his pockets. Grave robbers who mistake them for real coffins and get too close end up trapped inside their bodies. Okay, so here they actually state something as a matter of happening. What do you think about that? I mean, it's totally intended for kids, right? Kids love this kind of stuff. Some kids do, anyway. Then we have Houndoom from Pokemon Gold and Silver, who is a pretty effective sweeper. If you are burned by the flames it shoots from its mouth, the pain will never go away. So if its flames is able to burn a person, it's only natural to assume they could burn a Pokemon. So think about it this way when you're battling. Every time you tell this Pokemon to use Ember, Flamethrower, or any Fire-type move, you're condemning the opposing Pokemon to a lifetime of agony. Chandelure's evolutionary line is just as terrifying. Litwick will steal your soul, Chandelure burns it, and Lampet gets rid of it, seizing the victim's entire proof of existence. There are a ton of these morbid entries all over the place. If you thought these were some of the only ones, you should really take a look through some of the games. Slowking is considered to be one of the most intelligent Pokemon in the entire franchise. It's the final evolution of Slowbro, a Pokemon so immensely stupid and numb that it doesn't even notice sustaining injury. However, when a Shelter clenches its fangs on its head, it gains intelligence, surpassing any human being. How is this possible, you might ask? Well, according to Pokemon Crystal, every time it yawns, Shelter injects more poison into it. The poison makes it more intelligent. So there you have it. In the Pokemon universe, having poison injected directly into your brain and skull makes you more intelligent. With all the horror and terror that is going on in the Pokemon world, it's really nice to see that miracles such as these are possible. Slowking dedicates its new profound intelligence to solving the mysteries of the world and its universe. The strange thing about this, however, is that we trainers literally force these useful creatures into violent cockfighting. These Pokemon could be trying to cure some of the world's deadliest diseases, such as cancer, and could possibly complete the research on human immortality. And yet instead we make them slap each other in the face. They are not the monsters. We are.